Welcome to the Beat Reporter's Inbox on MLB.com, presented by Edward Jones. I am Adam McCalvy, MLB.com's Brewers reporter, here with my old friend Danny Wexelman off camera, which is her best position, asking the questions. Danny, what do we have first?
All right, Adam, we have Tyler first. It's great to be here with you today. He asks, how do the Brewers continue to manage the VR Sogard platoon in the second half? I frankly hate seeing Eric out of the lineup given his production.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, he's going to be out of the lineup a bit longer. It seems he turned an ankle on the Brewers' last road trip, did Eric Sogard. They're talking about putting him on the DL as we are talking here today. With the All-Star break, he'd be basically back right after the break. And it is going to be one of Craig Counsell's challenges in the second half because on one hand, in Eric Sogard, he has one of the most productive players on the team offensively. If you search minimum 100 plate appearances, he's right up there with Justin Turner and some of the best players in the league in terms of getting on base. But then they have Jonathan VR, who last season, outside of Ryan Braun, was the Brewers' most dynamic offensive player. He led the major leagues in steals. He has not been good this year at all. He's been hurt as well. Now he's off the DL, and I think the Brewers are invested in getting him back to a productive level. Look, they like him enough that they tried to pay him $20 million in spring training, and VR decided to go year to year. So I don't think they're going to totally give up on Johnny VR. It may be a time share, and Craig Counsell goes with a hot hand. Sogard probably has the edge, though, based on what he's done lately.
Awesome. Thanks for that question, Tyler. We have Laura next, who asks, what do you think is the most likely path for Junior Guerra?
Look, this is unfortunate, I think. I love Junior Guerra and what he did last year because as the guy covering the team, you root for the great stories, and Junior Guerra was one of the best stories in baseball, coming from pitching in France and Italy and all over the world to being one of the Brewers' best starting pitcher last season. The issue this year is he has not been the same. He missed a big chunk of the season with a calf injury. He got hurt swinging the bat on opening day. His velocity is way down. And Craig Counsell keeps making the point that the issue isn't necessarily velocity, it's location. Unfortunately for Junior Guerra, his problem is velocity and location. And velocity is not everything. Fastball miles per hour, that does not make or break a starting pitcher. But when you're talking about Junior Guerra maxing out in games lately below his average fastball last season, I mean, that's a problem. He is a different pitcher this year. I don't see how that changes. I don't see how you suddenly reclaim 4 or 5 miles an hour on a lost fastball in the span of 2 weeks. So unfortunately, the path I see for Junior Guerra is not a very good one, and it's going to continue to be, really, because they've covered this for a while now, to be up to the other starters to sort of rise to the level that Junior Guerra performed last season.
That was a great question, Laura. Great answer, Adam. Next, we have Brewers Nation, who asks, at what point will Arcia finally move up in the lineup?
This is one of those things that is armchair managing at its best, I think. Orlando Arcia has been really good now for going on 45 games or so. His batting average is over 350 in that span. Everyone has seen the things he's done in the field. The things he's done on the base paths. He's scooped the fans ice cream in the stands, so he's even doing things outside the white lines, which are very important. He's been really good. Now, do you want to move him up in the lineup, or is Craig Counsell happy with the level of offensive production he's getting from the team as it is? I think there's an argument to be made that they're scoring runs just fine, and that maybe there's something to be said for leaving Orlando Arcia down at 8. And so far, Craig Counsell, at least, has not been willing to make that change. The one thing I know Counsell is interested in, if the pieces all fit correctly, is hitting the pitcher 8th and getting a guy like Orlando Arcia who has some speed, who's swinging a good bat in that 9 hole. The idea, you kind of get a second leadoff hitter down there at the bottom of the order. For that to work, you need to have, one, a good guy to fit in that 9 hole. I think they do in Arcia if he's swinging a hot bat. But also your first and second hitters are important there because you want even your leadoff guy to be a little more of a run producer, your 2-hole hitter for sure to be a run producer. So for this to work, say Eric Sogard is in the leadoff spot. He's certainly fit that bill. Now Eric Thames hitting second. April Eric Thames would have been great to have that sort of alignment. May, June, Eric Thames, not so much. So I think all those pieces have to work right for Craig Counsell to start thinking of that type of thing. But again, so far he has sort of liked his offense the way it is, I think he's been pretty happy with the way that they've consistently scored, especially when you consider Ryan Braun's been out for a pretty big chunk of the season.
Thanks for that, Brewers Nation. Next, we have Eric, who asks, ironically, why didn't Eric Thames make the home run derby?
I like how Eric supports Eric. That's very nice. Number one, Eric Thames just did not perform in May and June. And that has been well documented. And I think the fact that he went into Craig Counsell's office on this last homestand and said, I could use a break, just a couple of days to unplug, showed where he was sort of at mentally. Now, I still asked him whether he got a call about the home run derby because his April was such a big story throughout the game of baseball, and often Major League Baseball will, sort of capitalize on that and ask a guy who, even if he's not an all-star, to come in and participate in this showcase event, the home run derby. Eric Thames said if they did ask, they must have had the wrong number because his phone didn't ring. He also said he wouldn't have wanted to do it anyway. He's one of those guys that feels it negatively affected his swing. He participated in at least one in South Korea, and for 2 weeks afterwards, he just kind of felt messed up. So Eric Thames is a really interesting guy in terms of maintaining his swing and thinking a lot about his swing. He takes bad games very hard, and that wore on him during, especially at the end of June, before he asked for that little break. Just the mental grind of that got to be a little bit much. I've told a couple of people that, unlike any player I've ever covered, you can tell what kind of a day Eric Thames had by looking at him in the clubhouse after the game. Certain guys, you never know whether they hit 3 home runs or struck out 3 times. With Eric Thames, you definitely know. When he had a bad game, he'll be standing there and he's got the bat in his hand and he is slowly working on his swing over and over and over. Usually he's still in his uniform pants, no shirt, standing there with a bat. And he'll do that for a good long time, go to the cage, get some swings in. He is definitely a player who focuses very hard on getting his swing just right. And he felt like the home run derby was not a good event in terms of keeping that swing just right.
All right, thanks for that answer. We have Steve, who asked a pretty big question. Who makes the bigger move? And I think this at the trade deadline, Cubs or Brewers?
Well, I think it is easy to say the Cubs. The Cubs are the defending World Series champs. They are not having a good year. I know everyone in Milwaukee is sort of looking at them and wondering what's going on in Chicago. When might they make a move? Are the Brewers going to be able to keep winning games at a good enough rate to hold off, I think, what most people think is a coming Cubs surge? So the Cubs are fully in go-for-it mode. I think it would be very surprising if Theo Epstein doesn't make some kind of addition or 2 or more at the trade deadline to bolster that club, because they are a World Series or bust type of team right now. The Brewers are not. I mean, they are a rebuilding club. This is the second full season. It feels like it's been a long time. This is the second full season of David Stearns. They are not necessarily in a position to start emptying the farm system they just filled up with all those prospects in order to go for it. So my guess for David Stearns and the Brewers is that it is far more likely that they make a more marginal move. Maybe they add a bullpen arm. And look, those can be huge trades. We've seen the last year or two. You can empty the farm just for a reliever. I don't think David Stearns is going to do that. I think he'll pick up maybe some middle relief help. And I think if the Brewers are going to do this, they're more likely to have to rely on the players that they've got, try to do it with this. I don't see, as Mark Attanasio said, he's not putting any pressure on David Stearns and the baseball people to totally divert off of this rebuilding plan. So that says to me, if we're going to bet on this, I think it's much more likely that they sort of stay the course a little bit and try to compete not just this year, but the years down the line.
Thanks for that question, Steve. We have fellow MLB.com reporters Anthony DiComo and Adam Berry watching right now, so shout out to them. Next, we have Ethan, who asks, was the Travis Shaw trade the steal of the year for the Brewers?
Oh, look, it was a really good trade. This is really interesting because obviously when you're a GM and you make a trade, you want it to work out for your team. You want to, quote unquote, win the trade. I don't know if David Stearns wants to win the trade as much as he won that trade, because you want to keep GMs interested in making deals with you. And he has had a couple of trades that have just been very unfortunate on the other side. And I'm thinking back to Will Smith last year. He's now out with Tommy John surgery. Tyler Thornburg goes to Boston in this Travis Shaw trade. Thornburg has been out for the whole season with a shoulder issue. That's not what a general manager wants. They do not want to obliterate the other team in a trade. The best trades actually are the ones where they legitimately do work for both teams. Now, for the Brewers, this trade has definitely worked out. Travis Shaw has been really excellent. The word Craig Counsell uses is steady, the way he performs at third base and at the plate. Just a steady run producer. He's really held down that 4th spot in the order. I know he loves hitting at Miller Park. It is a really good place, particularly for a left-handed hitter, which, remember, is the tough field at Fenway. So he's definitely picked up some power just from moving to a new ballpark. And we all know the backstory, too, for Travis Shaw. He has played this entire season with family on his mind. Him and his wife had a young daughter that was born with a heart defect, had a couple of surgeries in June, I believe it was, right after the baby was born. And Travis Shaw, whenever the Brewers are home, he's at the hospital in the morning with his family. He goes to the ballpark, plays a game, goes back to the hospital for an hour, gets some sleep, rinse and repeat. And he has really had a lot on his plate this season. And it makes his performance, I think, all the more impressive. So, unfortunately for Boston, that has not been a trade that worked out because that's just the first piece. They also got 3 pretty good prospects in that trade, did the Brewers. Certainly a trade that David Stearns did well on.
Thanks for that question, Ethan. Next, we have Thomas, who asks, do the Brewers eventually trade an outfield prospect or 2 for pitching prospects?
Eventually, yes. Now, the question is, when is the time to do that? The Brewers are rich in outfield prospects. They have their top prospect, Lewis Brinson. We've seen Brett Phillips in the major leagues this year. Ryan Cordell is a really good player down at AAA. Corey Ray is their top draft pick from last season. He's the number 2 prospect right now. And the list kind of goes on and on and on. David Stearns loves acquiring center fielders and shortstops. So in the outfield point of this, he's got a lot of very similar players in the minor leagues. Those guys are all advancing toward the major leagues. Again, Phillips, Brinson got a little taste this year. So eventually, yes, they do have to figure out who are going to be the guys that play for us in the major leagues and who are going to be assets that we use to fill holes elsewhere, and pitching is a really good place to target. Now, the question, though, is the time. So is this the year to do that? Are the Brewers good enough this year in a down division to capitalize and try to go for it? Get a pitcher to replace a guy like Junior Guerra who's down, to replace a Chase Anderson who's on the DL with an oblique injury? I don't know the answer to that. I think there's 3 weeks for David Stearns, Mark Attanasio, Matt Arnold, the assistant GM, and Craig Counsell to figure out who are we as a team, where are we at in our competitive cycle, and when is it time to start making the sort of go for a trade that would cost you one of these outfield prospects. I think, if I'm guessing, if I'm the GM, time's not quite right yet. I think a year or 2 down the line, then you can really start using those assets.
Awesome. Thanks for that question, Thomas. Next comes from Nate, who asks, who will be the Brewers' ace when they get to the playoffs? Last time they made the deal for CC when they had Prince. Who will be the move, and how much will they have to give up?
Boy, that is a tough one, because the CC trade, remember, it was rumored a little bit beforehand, but it came together very quickly, and Doug Melvin made that trade early in July. I thought when the Brewers had so much success with CC Sabathia that other teams subsequently would try to make similar moves. Get a guy, I think with CC it was the second week of July. Try to get a player early that gives you 2, 3, 4 extra starts of a player, and it makes it a little more palatable to give up the sort of package of prospects like the Brewers did for that trade. Who's the guy going to be? I can't tell you that right now, because I still don't think it's going to be this year. Our man Phil Rogers in Chicago, or one of our great MLB.com national writers, thinks the Brewers should go for Jose Quintana of the White Sox. And that's something I've heard from other people too. Now that would take a big time haul of prospects to get him. I don't have the sense that after going so hard down the road of rebuilding over the last couple of years and having a lot of success stockpiling prospects, that David Stearns is all of a sudden going to change course and start unloading those guys for an ace. So I'm going to punt this question, admittedly, and defer, because I think it's a year down the line.
That was a great question, Nate. We have our last one coming from Marco, who asks, do you think the Brews and Beards will put up numbers against the Bronx Bombers? How will this weekend series go?
Well, look, if you're talking about good places to hit for left-handed hitters, Yankee Stadium is a very good place to hit for left-handed hitters. So I know Eric Thames and Travis Shaw are going to go into Yankee Stadium with some wide eyes. Shaw obviously has played there a good deal with the Boston Red Sox. So, yes, I think we will see some offense. It's July at Yankee Stadium. Everybody in Major League Baseball is hitting the ball in the air these days. I'm really excited to see Aaron Judge in person and see what this all the fuss is about. So I think there is a very good chance that the offense will rule this weekend at Yankee Stadium. By the way, it's a fun series to think back to past Brewers seasons, they are old American League East rivals of the Yankees. And I have loved over the years hearing stories from Gorman Thomas and Jim Gantner and Robin Yount and some of those other players about the great rivalries. They had brawls on the field and a lot of really good fisticuffs between the Yankees and Brewers. We'll see if we get any of that this week, and I have a hard time believing that's going to happen. So thank you to everybody for the questions, and thanks for watching the Beat Reporters Inbox on MLB.com, presented by Edward Jones. Tune in again next time.